Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we recap All-Star Weekend. The Bucks pretty well represented. Damian Lillard, part of the winning team in the All-Star game. But what about Saturday night? We get into that and our thoughts on an ever-evolving All-Star tournament. We get into all of that coming up next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for checking out and subscribing to the Locked On Bucks newsletter. If you have not done so yet, you can sign up for free at lockedondaily.com and get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All-Star Weekend wrapping up Sunday nights. Camille, the Bucks, we're going to be have more representation in it until Giannis ruled out. He was still there and visible throughout the weekend, though. But I suppose we'll save Saturday night for our next segment. Last night in the All-Star game, Damian Lillard's team wins. So there's that. But your overall takeaway from All-Star Sunday night?
That we needed more basketball on All-Star Sunday night. Like, I'm not mad at the format change with the tournaments because I understand, like, Adam Silver's just trying to figure something out that can get these guys to compete. Because last year when you had a team score over 200 points, the other team had like 175, like that wasn't going to be fun and nothing that he wanted to continue to throw out there. So coming with that idea of like, hey, let's have these little mini teams and then have a tournament. Maybe that should up the intensity level. And I think the actual product on the court was more competitive than what we've seen in years prior. But I think they had a big presentation problem. I think they had way too many breaks within the game. And I think that's also why the last game of the night felt the way that it did, because they had like a random 15-minute break in the middle of the last game.
Oh, it was like 25. Yeah.
Yes, like to honor the inside crew, which I'm not beyond giving them their flowers, but like they have to figure out the pacing and the timing of those things, because guys had to go a long time without actually playing ball, then come back on the court and try to hoop after that. And from what I heard from the players as well, they didn't like that part of it either. And they could get injured that way. So I needed more basketball. Don't mind the format, but need more basketball.
I don't mind the format. And I mean, it seems like you're not going to pull the plug on it after 1 year, but you and I talked about this earlier in the week too, that I don't really take it as this was a draft off the cuff, that I think there was some intent behind the selections here to kind of have it stacked of here's the OGs and here's the European squad. I get the sense that's where we're headed go forward, is you build out a 4-team tournament and you stack it with like, here's the up and comers, here's the former MVPs, here's the European team. I mean, I think there's two options. Either do something like that or just go back to East versus West. Because as you're watching it, if you're just tuning in, and here's the other thing, it's going to be interesting to see the ratings when they come out, because the league was up against a pretty big event that was on network TV for 3 hours, duration of All-Star Weekend. But if you were somebody that was just coming in and checking out, okay, I root for the Bucks, let's see what Damian Lillard is doing here, and you see Team Shaq. Who the hell is on Team Shaq? Who's on Team Chuck? Like, the league just, it seems like, continues to shoot themselves in the foot whenever they try to make something new here, that you can see the intent behind it. As we mentioned, you said it too, like, I didn't think the format of a tournament was bad in itself, and it did seem like there was a little more competition there. But it's just way too overthought and too many fixes for an existing problem.
Yeah, and too much Kevin Hart. I don't know why the NBA thought that Kevin Hart coming out there being a live MC was going to be a good idea. And just the commentary in general as well. Like, why are we having a bowl debate watching Wemby during the All-Star game, like the pacing, the commentary, like the NBA has talked so much about how they want the players to take this game more seriously and how they want them to compete. But then like the broadcast around it was some unserious business at times as well. Like I felt like as it continued to go on, like by the time I got to the last game, the commentary was at least more in line of like, hey, we're watching the game, joking around a little bit, but like the focus is the guys who are on the court. So it got a little bit better as it went on. But early on, it was just like, I'm tuning into this game that's supposed to be like highlighting the best in the league, honoring the NBA, bigging the league up. And it's people making jokes. It's Draymond saying how all this is terrible and this sucks. And it's just like, it felt like a disconnect in what the NBA was trying to achieve and how they went about actually doing it. And to your point of people just trying to flip back and see their team, like, depending on when you flip back, you might not have even seen any basketball. You were probably seeing a presentation going on, or
you see the presentation, you think, is it done? All right.
Right. Like it's just they got to fix that part of it for sure, because it has some potential. But I think ultimately it's always going to come down to whether or not the players themselves want to take it serious. Like that's why whenever Giannis was playing, it felt like, okay, like we're about to get a little juice right now because we know how Giannis plays. Wemby went into it with the same mentality this year of like, I'm coming out here to really hoop. I don't want to make no friends. Like I think this
Sunday night, Friday,
Sunday night.
Story.
The skills challenge was a different story, but for the game itself, was like, yeah, I'm trying to hoop right now.
I said I think there's like a clear, you have to do this or that, and honestly, I think one of the bigger disconnects too is, like we'd mentioned before, either do USA versus the world, which has been talked about by fans for decades, of, hey, it's starting in the 90s when you start to see more and more international players break in. That'd be interesting. Or just go back to East-West and again, like, let them wear the team jerseys. You think back to the old games where that's another way to promote, oh, this guy plays for this team. And as much as I love inside the NBA, and by the way, like we had this weird eulogy for them when, at least latest reporting, they're not really going anywhere. It's just going to be licensed out to ESPN for usage. Now your mileage may vary with that of what's it actually going to be on ESPN, but still, it was just so bizarre to have that in the middle of a game setting. But when we have the discussions about what's taking place and what's the discourse around these games, and you mentioned Draymond and other players sharing the thoughts of what isn't working and random, let's talk about bull while this is happening. All the discourse is centered around trades, and I don't know who this team or this guy plays for. I mean, as much as we all love inside the NBA, there is a sliver there of old guys criticizing the new game. Now, I do agree with what Charles Barkley said before the game when Draymond Green was talking about the All-Star, and Chuck just said, look, it's your fault. It's you guys that came in here and didn't take this seriously, so Adam Silver had to constantly come up with new ideas. But I think we've just moved so far past what the game was, and every fix it gets further and further away from basketball, that, you know what, like, just do that. Go back to East versus West, wear your team jerseys so you can promote, this is the guy that plays for the Spurs, this guy plays for the Pacers, maybe you haven't heard of him before. And unfortunately, as we've seen with the NBA Cup, you want to incentivize these guys to win, just put a big cash purse and say, okay, the winning team, whatever conference it is, gets X amount of dollars. So do that, and I guarantee you we'll see more competition in the All-Star game.
Yeah, because they get paid now, but like with the way that salaries have gone up in the NBA, like they get like what, $125,000 for winning the game or something around that. Like, it's not to say that that's chump change, but like for these players who are coming into this, where the All-Star break, as we've said before, it's not the halfway point of the season. Like it's really like 2/3 after the season is done and then you're coming back for that final stretch. And one thing that I used to say going into the game is like, they're not playing as hard. It's not a summer run where if you do get injured in the summer run, you have a lot more time to recover. Like if you get hurt during an All-Star game, your team has less than 30 games at that point for the final playoff push. Like, do you think it can make a difference if they actually move the All-Star date up a little bit so it comes more so at a true halfway point in the league, so players don't feel like, hey, well, after this, I got to sprint to the finish, where it feels like we got a little bit more time, like I can go a little bit harder? Or do you think that if they do go back to East-West after seeing it 2 years ago now, will they just go back to that competition level of like, we just out here doing what we got to do? Like, do you think there's any true way to fix it, or is this just the players have to want to do it?
It's an interesting question. Let's save that. Let's get to the answers that we both have coming up in the next segment. Also, Saturday night, as much as we're opining over the All-Star game itself, I think what we've started to witness on Saturday may be the biggest travesty that we're seeing here. So we will get into that conversation coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by Hungry Root. When it comes to grocery shopping and meal planning, I've had this ongoing problem. You just don't have the time between work, life, trying to eat healthier. You're constantly feeling stressed out. Whenever you go to the grocery store, you buy things you don't need and then end up with no time to actually cook it. Sticking to your health goals is always a struggle as well. But everything changes when you discover Hungry Root. It will be a game changer and the easiest way to eat healthy without all the stress. With Hungry Root, it's like having a personal shopper and a nutritionist all in one. They'll take care of your grocery shopping, recommending meals and groceries based on your tastes and health goals, from anti-inflammatory to high protein and gluten-free options. The best part is every meal is ready in 15 minutes or less. Healthy meals that actually taste great, all delivered directly to your door. It'll be a huge time saver and make healthy eating so much simpler. You're going to love Hungry Root. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box and a free item in every box for life. Just go to hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code LockedOnNBA. That is hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/LockedOnNBA, code LockedOnNBA. Don't miss out. So I do want to get to Saturday night's festivities there, but All-Star itself, in terms of what to do to fix it, like we can toss out these ideas, like, I shared two of go back to East-West and add more clarity to what teams these guys play for. Try to promote your teams more. I mean, I think this all ties into a laundry list of issues that I think this league has had with leadership, starting at the top in terms of what is your mission statement? What are you looking to get across to your fans? And why should they be invested in your product? Because you've allowed the discourse to sway one way that for the longest time, everybody knew what load management was. It was the most oft used phrase among Bucks or amongst basketball fans. Load management. Is this guy going to play in a game that I bought tickets to? The usual discourse around free agency and player moves, how that's absorbed basically all of the air in the space, that we care about that more than we do the games that are being played themselves. Promoting stars, promoting your teams, building and creating new stars. I mean, Camille, you and I, not to derail this too much, experienced it with something else that we both thoroughly enjoy for years. When you just looked at, man, another John Cena match, like, are we not going to build up anybody new here? And look what's happened now since they've done that. So you need to build new stars. You need to, and it really starts with, I go back to the presentation of your league as well. I mean, when you look at the halftime show, and this isn't to just single out broadcast partners, when you look at the halftime show on ESPN, could you imagine something like that being a part of an NFL broadcast? Never. Like, it would happen once and Roger Goodell would say, what is this? We're not doing this. Focus on the game, put together a video package. It needs more than 2 minutes of content. So it's these types of things that have just continually, they've shot themselves in the foot here. And it does give me a little bit of optimism with the broadcast rights changes. I don't anticipate massive changes with the Amazon broadcast, because as we've seen with the NFL, they just kind of will cherry pick these pieces. We bring in a good producer. I am optimistic about the NBC broadcast, for one, for nostalgic purposes, but also when you look across the board at the way that NBC has produced sporting events, arguably the best of any of those major networks out there. So I am quite hopeful that that's going to spark quite a bit of change. But yeah, for the All-Star game itself, the larger issue is just games played that remain. As you mentioned, a third of the season is left, and you know, look, it's not to get into the, well, back in my day, we flew coach and all this, but like, it's different now. Like I get travel sucked back then. I'm not going to dispute that. But you also basically played from line to line if you're one of the bigs. Like, you didn't have to cover as much ground as you do now. It was a much different game. You couldn't afford to play one-way players to the extent that we saw back in the day. So that's something else to keep in mind here. And for teams like the Bucks, we've gone over what I think only the Charlotte Hornets in the Eastern Conference at least have more games remaining. When you're a team that has that type of aspirations, and maybe you're an older team, and in turn, you're an older player in the All-Star game, and you look at games left and back-to-backs, and also the fact that All-Star weekend is no longer just, are you in the three-point shootout or slam dunk contest on Saturday, and are you playing in the All-Star game itself? Like, way back in the day, you basically had those two events. They would always kind of tinker with, what else can we add? We'll do the WNBA, NBA challenge. We'll do the skills challenge. Were you sitting courtside at the celebrity game on Friday night? That's about it. Now you have tons of media obligations. You have events that are going on all weekend. Damian Lillard with the scholarships that he was giving out. I mean, his entire weekend was booked. And that's another part of it. If you're a player and you think, well, I'm already tied up all weekend, I'm going to get basically 2 actual days off after that between All-Star game ending and a regular season resuming. Like, I don't have that much to give. This is what you're going to get. So I think that's the other issue, is it's another thing that just screams, do we really need to shorten the schedule significantly here to space out these games more, add more interest, and add more significance to this inventory of games when you don't have 4 games a week? Maybe you just have designated days, or you play 2 to 3 games a week at most, and it brings in more attention and puts more importance on those games, and also gives these guys more rest.
Yeah, maybe you do that, or you extend the season even a little bit long. Maybe you get an extra 2 weeks on there, so you're not having to schedule as many games so closely together. But I think those are all good points to consider. And I think that the NBA can't continue just to do the same thing over and over. Like, you have to continue to bring in new audiences. Like, I saw a comment earlier as we record this live on YouTube that there was too much Mr. Beast, not enough basketball. And honestly, the Mr. Beast part of it, I didn't mind. That was like maybe 5 minutes of airtime in between a game. And I'm like, that makes some sense. That felt like something that you would see if you go to a game.
Yeah,
and
I would prefer to be somebody other than Mr. Beast. But.
Right, yes. But again, different generations, like the kids, the younger people, like, they know who Mr. Beast is. If you're trying to bring him in, I get it. I personally, I don't watch Mr. Beast. I've seen him on accident every time that I've seen a video from him, but I get the appeal of it. And watching it, like, it was fun to see, like, can this guy make 1 shot before Dame makes 3? And talking to my husband, like, could you do that? Could you make one of these before? So, like, that part of it, like, that's cool. 5 minutes, sure. But when you're having the breaks back outside to the other TNT crew, then you're coming back inside, then you're doing the thing on court with Kevin Hart and the coaches in your interview, like, that was all too much. It was too much. But, you know, again, like, they got to keep trying and figuring this out, because it doesn't seem like most people are happy with what the All-Star product is. And the question might be, well, do you even need an All-Star game at this point anymore? Because you got players who are seen in more markets than before. In the 90s, it was different. That was one of your only times
to see them.
Yeah, all of these players. But now with League Pass, with social media, you have a lot more access to these players than you normally do. But I personally think that there's still a role for All-Star weekend, a role for the All-Star game, a role for the dunk contest, the 3, like, all of that, which we'll talk about next. Like, I think there's still a role for it, but just the presentation around it needs to be fixed a little bit. And just figuring out, like you said, what's the mission here? Like, what are we trying to accomplish, and then setting out to accomplish it? Because this weekend stuff felt a little chaotic to me, of like, I don't know what you were really trying to do here.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to observe the fallout from this, and I'm sure hear more of the same of this didn't work. One quick note as we transition into what happened on Saturday night, where the Bucks had more representation. Damian Lillard only took 1 shot in the final and played, I think, a team low 2 or 3 minutes. I'm sure that was by design. We heard Doc Rivers' comments earlier in the week too, of hope he wins the 3-point shootout. Hope he plays 30 seconds in the All-Star game itself. And that's basically what we saw in that second game. So I'm sure part of it was we got a long stretch of games in front of us. I was already a little banged up coming in. I'm good.
Yeah, I
Steph,
saw
this is your moment.
Nate Jones, his business manager, said like it was the hand, like that was by design in the final game of not playing him that much. But at least during the first game when we did see Dame, he put on the show. Power forward Dame helped them win the game.
Yeah. And helped them. He hit the shot that advanced them to the final as well. Saturday night, though, we did get a chance to see Andre Jackson Jr. carry the torch of everybody else that we've seen as a member of the Bucks participate in slam dunks in the past. And Damian Lillard attempting to become a 3-time defending three-point shootout champion. So we'll recap what we saw there and take a look ahead to the rest of the week coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there is no better place to get in on that than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. With FanDuel, you have all those personal touches and countless opportunities to, as we mentioned, stay in on the action throughout the course of the game, before tip-off or while it's already in progress. Right now, FanDuel giving new customers $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Camille, Saturday night, we got a chance to see Andre Jackson Jr. in the slam dunk contest. And I mean, I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on not just Ajax's performance. The dunk contest in general is it's starting to reach the point of, oh, they're still doing that, huh? I don't know how you fix this one, quite frankly. I mean, I think we've just seen every dunk there is to see. Mac McClung, is he the first ever 3 straight winner, I believe? Yeah. So he becomes the first ever to do that. I don't even have a problem with the Mac McClung's played in as many NBA games as he's participated in dunk contests. I mean, who cares? Then have somebody else go out there and beat him. But it's the larger point of the weekend of like, guys don't want to embarrass themselves. Guys don't want to try hard. That's how you can embarrass yourself. And if you're an NBA star that loses in the dunk contest to Mac McClung, like LeBron, oh, maybe I'll join. Ja Morant saying the same thing. Giannis saying the same thing. Fine, I'll believe it when I see it.
I knew as soon as I saw Ja, I'm like, no, this happens every year after every dunk contest. There's somebody who you would expect to have already done it, who has it, and they're on social media like, man, this was nice. I think I'm going to do it next year. And then next year comes and they're never there to do it. Like, I'm not believing it. As soon as I saw Giannis say, I'll do it I knew Giannis was playing immediately. I was like, Giannis ain't about to do no dunk contest. Yeah. He's already done it. He's already put his stripes in, at least as a star in the league, of like, hey, I did that when I was younger. I was out there. And then Ja's like talking about like, come on, Zach, like AG, like, let's do this. And I'm like, their dunk contest was like 10 years ago at this point, almost. Like, we trying to get Zach LaVine back out here and Aaron Gordon, who, by the way, when they did their dunk contest, weren't really established guys in the league at that point. Like, they were still young guys, athletic guys coming up. And I think that's always like the framework. And for people who were upset at Mac McClung playing, it's like, well, no one else wanted to do it. Like, we had to go and get him 3 years ago. Then he won it. So he's like, you come back and you defend your championship, which he did last year, came back again this year, first three-peat ever. And I thought that he had some really interesting dunks, some fun dunks. Him and Castle in the finals, I thought actually made it somewhat interesting to watch. Yeah. So I'm always here for it. Again, do not believe Giannis for 1 second really was sitting here saying he's going to do the dunk contest. We saw last night during the Sunday night festivities, he said his phone he was hacked. He never even tweeted that. That wasn't him. He said, I think my kids took my phone in another room or something like that. But like the Saturday night part is still lighthearted, it's still fun. I do wonder if the 3-point contest should move into that final spot for the night and then put the dunk contest in the middle, just because that one is a little bit more hit or miss than what the 3-point contest can be at this point.
At the 3-point contest, Dame eliminated in the first round. If he would have hit his final shot, he would have, and that was Tyler Hero that he would have moved past too, the eventual winner. So
he would give him like 20 over the 19.
Yeah. So and afterwards too, Damian Lillard saying, "That's it, I'm retired from 3-point shootout." You got the sense too that there was kind of a weight lifted off his shoulders of, all right, I don't have to advance. I'm good. I can play a little bit of time tomorrow, and then I'm good for the weekend. But I agree as well. I mean, I think where the league currently is, the importance is two-way play and shooting. So that's, I think, the other kind of issue with the slam dunk contest. Not that, we still don't enjoy seeing slam dunks. And you think about Mac McClung on social media and that presence. Highlights. Most of what you see is still dunks, but it's shifted more and more towards European style of deep shooting, 3-point shooting, and two-way play that I do think we've kind of evolved to the point where the 3-point shootout needs to be in the final spot. And I mean, I still am not a fan of the starry balls and everything that we've added there, but like, it does kind of seem like you can spawn off multiple different 3-point shootouts. You have your traditional, you have something like the starry where you just have a deep 3-point shootout in a horse style format. And the other thing to add, I mean, it does kind of seem like when we talk about the skills competition, I would much rather see something that's centered on defense. How you build that out, I'm not totally sure. But it just seems like, look, it's staring us in the face. Like, you need to be able to play defense in this league and you have to shoot. So let's spotlight those two things All-Star weekend more than anything else.
Yeah, that would be dope. And seeing the Unrivaled League and how they did their 1v1 tournament.
One-on-one, yeah.
I would love it. I know it won't probably happen.
We've seen a ton of players say, let's do that. And that's great until it's announced. And then you see those names drop off.
Yeah, because again, the embarrassment factor of it, of if you go out there and you get smacked 0-11, and social media is going to be unforgiving, and the ego that comes with that. And I think that goes into like there's the argument that the guys are too cool right now, like players are a little too cool for school, so to speak. But just that competition level, I think would be really fun to see during All-Star Weekend, a 1v1 tournament. But I don't know how many guys would actually want to do it because, like I said, if you lose or something like that, or you get upset, can you handle what comes after that? So a lot of guys are always worried about their legacies and what's going on around them, which is also part of why for the All-Star game itself, I think a lot of guys just kind of jog through it because they're like, I'm trying to get that championship. Like, that's what everybody's basing my legacy on anyway. So I'm just trying to get to that part of it. I'm not trying to mess with this. Like, cool, honor, let's have some fun. But like, I'm not taking this seriously. Like, we heard Anthony Edwards say that blatantly last year of like, I'm not taking this. Like, this is just for fun. I'm not out here to do that. And he didn't even play either, which was a little disappointing. And LeBron coming out as well saying last minute, like, no, I'm not playing. But as for the Saturday night things, I think you can keep tweaking that a little bit more. And then to your thing about having like maybe a deeper 3-point contest, I know this year they couldn't get the logistics together to have like Sabrina come back and do the shootout with Steph, but that WNBA influence as well, if they can do something with that around the shooting, I think that'd be cool to watch.
Yeah, and that in itself was interesting, how it started with Caitlin, and then let's pivot back to Sabrina, and we couldn't come to an agreement on it. Seemed rather interesting. I'd love to hear the story behind all of that and what was envisioned and what ultimately did not come to fruition. And just seeing some of the feedback from players on this event too. It's the guys that are out of the league. It's what you expect to hear them. Pat Beverly shared some thoughts on it. Last night after it happened. The last thing I'll point out, it's one of the other things that when we just went through the pain points of the league's current presentation and leadership within the league, what you have to do to get a hold of, or what do we want to present? How do we want to be viewed? And how do we start to shape that narrative? Ratings discourse is the other big one of NBA ratings on the decline. I hate it, and now I'm playing a part in it. I'm curious to see what the ratings for this weekend are going to be because of number one, it was just different. And the Four Nations tournament that was going on on the hockey side, which everybody was running, 3 fights, 9 seconds into the game between USA and Canada on Saturday night. I believe I only saw parts of it, but I believe that was an ABC broadcast. And then, as we mentioned, you had Saturday Night Live celebrating their 50th anniversary on NBC last night, opposing the All-Star game. So prepare yourself for the league's in trouble. The ratings were in the toilet for All-Star Weekend, and this is the performance that we're getting. But yeah, your thoughts on All-Star Weekend, the All-Star game, how to save it, how to change it. I suppose save is a bit strong there, but what you would do differently if you were Adam Silver to fix All-Star Weekend. Leave those thoughts in the comments. We'll address those over the next couple of days here, and possibly even on our mailbag show, because we have quite a few questions that came in from you guys. It's probably going to be a multi-part episode. We're trying to get Frank involved as well to tackle the questions that you guys have left us on the YouTube page, on Twitter, and to that email address as well. You can still leave some. We're still finalizing the group of questions, and we hope to record that sometime today with Frank. But nonetheless, we'll have at least one mailbag episode coming your way this week, and I think we're going to take a look at some of the teams around the Bucks in the Eastern Conference standings as well. We've talked about what the Bucks have in terms of their schedule and back-to-backs. How does it vary for some of those teams that you have to pay attention to? The Indiana Pacers, the Detroit Pistons, and teams like the Miami Heat. So we'll get into those discussions as we move closer and closer to the second half of the season beginning. That'll do it for today's show, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.